Hey y'all, welcome back. Today and I guess for two lectures, at least for two lectures, we'll be doing the Olympics. Okay, the Olympics, super important in terms of world athletics. It's the second most globally viewed sporting event after FIFA World Soccer. For Canadians, even more so. Okay? For a small middle power, for a middle power country like Canada, the Olympics have always been super important for getting the message across that we matter and that we compete well and that we can, right? And sending a message about who we are as Canadians. So about identity construction is integral. This is definitely a site of identity construction, especially important for middle powers like Canada. Okay, and which has a rich history in the Olympics. So today we're going to look at the history of the Olympics. We're going to look at Olympic Charter values, and then comparing those to how the original Charter values, how they have played out over time and through history. And it is really interesting. Some things don't change, and we'll look at continuity and change in these. And through that, we'll also look at Canada's contribution. Okay? A later lecture will look at the Winter Olympics and Canada's involvement there and the history of the Winter Olympics as well. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to turn off the film for going forward in the lectures just to keep the size shorter. So I hope you don't miss my face too much as we go on. I don't think you will. All right. Okay, let's just want to start with pointing out just how important the Olympics have been to Canada, reinforce that from the get-go. And if you grew up when I did, maybe a couple of you did, you would remember that if you watch TV until 12 o'clock or 1 in the morning or 2, there would be the day would close. And the broadcast schedule will close, and you get the bars on all night. But before that happened, each station had its own little closer, right? And some of them went with actually the Lord's Prayer. That would never happen today. Another one in Canada, and that was Global TV, ended with this really patriotic, great little which is now an NFB film called With Glowing Hearts. Okay, and it's just a fantastic period piece. If you look that up on the NFB site, it'll get you. But it's got all these scenes of the country, and it ends. This was created, I think, in '78 or '79. It ends with Greg Joy in Montreal and his famous high jump. And the reason it's famous is because he took silver there. And the other side of that coin is here we are all super patriotic about a silver medal. The backstory there, and what's not. What that actually highlights is the fact that we're the only country in Olympics history that hosted the games without winning a gold medal, okay? And we hosted at great costs, okay? And that's where we'll be going in this lecture today. The cost of the Olympics is part of it, and the takeaway there, because of the massive overruns, is Montreal's legacy. It really begins that shift away from the amateur ethic, okay? Second most watched in the world, super important to everyone. Second, so globally, immensely validating for your regime. We'll look at that as well. And we don't even know how much really has been spent on the Olympics by some regimes like Russia and China. But cost overruns really begin there with Montreal, and Sochi is probably is definitely the winner, but probably a lot more than what the Russians claimed. It probably cost them somewhere between 55 and 75 billion to host it. So that's how much it matters. And in terms of viewership, the 100-meter sprint alone is, by some measures, the third or fourth most watched single championship event in the world. So, yeah, and it's fascinating to consider that all of this is an account of one Frenchman's vision, Pierre de Coubertin, who would be astounded and in some ways kind of not super happy with what these games have become, given his firm commitment to the amateur ethic. the modern games, bringing back the ancient games, is de Coubertin's vision. De Coubertin, and we mentioned him before. And why is he bringing it back? Well, he feels that the French are soft, and they keep losing. They keep losing both largely because how they train their young and not putting an emphasis in sport. We talked about that vis-a-vis muscular Christianity. They keep losing also on the battlefield. 1871 Franco-Prussian War, very humiliating defeat. This happens when Pierre is only 7 years old, and this mattered a lot to Frenchmen. It's a big part of explaining World War I. For 50 years, the French have one idea on their mind, which is revenge against the Germans. Okay? So the Franco-Prussian War, 1871, very humiliating, and a great lesson that the French, there's something missing here in their culture. And what's needed, he says, is what the English have, or what he thinks, right? The headmaster Arnold, the boarding school approach to athletics has taken hold there. That's forged generations of manly, heroic, civilized sporting gentlemen. And you know that, right? Arnold's the thing. Coubertin also becomes a historian, and he's fascinated in antiquity, in the ancients, in the ancient Greeks and Romans, and specifically ancient Athenians and their education system. And what they had was something called the gymnasium system, and there's still, my parents came from Holland, my cousins all live there, and they still have that system there. Gymnasi is the gymnasium system. And what it is, well, they have several. They have Mabo Havo Gymnasi in the Netherlands and in Germany as well. But the gymnasium system is the high school certificate path, and it's still the European name for them. But what it was back in antiquity is it was the Spartan school, the warrior school. So it's a combination of physical and academic training. The warrior school, so to speak. So he's fascinated in this, and he's inspired by this. And to the extent that it meshes with what Arnold is doing, because, and that's key, as Coubertin discovers, there's a lot that's kind of disturbing about the ancient games that he doesn't want to replicate. And specifically, so that's a really key point in the lecture, that the ancient games are very different, and you know that now from what I said before. They're a culture celebration of the god Zeus, but also of men as gods, and they're 100% winner take all, right? The Olympic Games are known for the winner of the stadium race. Right? Winning validates you as Zeus's representative on Earth. Okay? And in boxing and in pancration, you're even allowed, in the ancient Olympics, you're even allowed to kill your opponent. This is not a crime if you kill your opponent in the context of the games. And if he loses, he doesn't even want to live anyways, because that's how much it matters. That's how much it matters. And the pre-game prayer is begging Zeus for victory or death. Now, this is something Coubertin absolutely doesn't want. This absolutely goes against the ethic that he's trying to create in the modern Olympics. And I'll mention how the fascists actually are going back to the ancient model when they look at sports. So that's a really interesting division. Okay, so, and in fact, he says this, what he's thinking about later when he's reflecting back on this. He says, the Hellenism, love of Greek culture that had permeated the atmosphere of the First Congress started to fade. It was to Arnold that we turned more or less consciously for inspiration. So he is inspired more by what is happening in England with, and I told you he wanted to call them the Arnoldian games, with what's happening with muscular Christianity. Then he is really trying to replicate what the ancients are doing with sport. Okay, so the British model of making sport an integral part of one's experience in youth and one's development and one's gentlemanly conduct. That is much more what he's after in the games, and that's what's reflected in the first charter. So he sees this as a way forward. Resurrecting the old games creates a spectacle that validates the centrality of sport, but it's going to be a very different kind of ethic, a very different kind of sport. right? We're not worshiping man and individualism. It's about team play and unity and peace. And winning is not everything, right? It's not the only thing, and it's definitely not the goal. It's secondary. It's the gentlemanly Arnold vision that we've talked about before, and you should know quite well. So resurrecting the old games is about creating the spectacle that will be a vehicle to promote his view of what character is, character building and sportsmanship. And he's not the only one. He's not the only one. This 100% is the amateur ethic, and he sees a real existential threat to sport, or a contemporary threat to sport, is the money game. And so he very much fits into what we talked about last time about the defending amateurism. This is a key goal for him, that sport has grown up now in a society where lust for money is threatening to rot its to its marrow. So he's got the vision of the Arnold game and the amateur ethic, and it is under threat like it never has been. And so here's a chance to change that with this grand spectacle of amateurism. The imposition of an individual oath on all participants would be the best way of bringing sport within the realm of honor again. And he's right. And we've talked about this is a large part of the reason the Olympic movement and how successful it is and how big it is and how every athlete wants to get their name there. This is the path. This is the athletic path that everybody wants, not professionalism. And but the amateur associations are what block your access to it if you've ever played the money game or played against anyone who has. So very important for maintaining amateurism, probably for a lot longer than it would have otherwise. Okay, so know this, that amateurism is super important at the very beginning. That's one of the charter values that we'll look at and what happened to that. The other point I want to make is that sport reflects culture. We say that all the time, and so does Coubertin. He's a product of his time, which is this wider cultural context of Philhellenism, the love of all things ancient Greece. Okay? And we see that in the fact that Coubertin is not the only one to try and resurrect the Olympics. There's a lesser successful model that happens with this Sir Brooks in England, who tries to he hosts a small Olympiad in his local town, and then he goes national and managed to host one UK Olympics. So this is not a completely out there thing. And partly what this is there at this time in the 19th century, there's this real romantic attachment to Greece, to Greece itself, which is kind of the cause célèbre for Europeans. One way to look at it is kind of the baby of the protected child of the stronger Western European powers, because they helped wrest its independence in this war of independence against the Turks, against the Ottoman Empire, right, against the Muslims. So the European powers helped in that, and it's kind of like the Spanish Civil War, where there's a romantic attachment by thoughtful romantics and maybe left-leaning and supportive individuals to go help them in their fight for freedom against the Ottomans. And Lord Byron, he's a romantic of the era, bar none, right? And he heads out to fight there as well. Doesn't do much good, but in any case, Greece's independence is really due to Western powers, and there's a real romantic attachment to Greece and all things Greece. Partly that's also spurred by the fact that this is a great age of archaeology. This is when Europeans are heading out all over the world and heading to Egypt and the ancient sites there, but also archaeological digs in Greece, and so there's a real obsession with Greek history, ancient history, with the ancients, and a lot of course, those artifacts from these archaeological sites are ending up in European museums, from Berlin to London to wherever. But yes, Philhellenism is a part of what's happening here. Okay, so again, Coubertin, not the only one, but yes, Coubertin is capitalizing on 19th century Philhellenism and this romanticism of Greece, and there's a lot of that going around. Now, Coubertin can't get much traction in France, so he works on taking his idea international, and he starts plugging it in the 1880s. He spends years full-time marketing the idea, traveling to the United States, traveling to the UK, and he's a lawyer by trade, so he forgoes his career in law and in the military. He's also in the military in order to pursue this with just total conviction. And you have to hand it to him. He's a real visionary who succeeds against massive odds. One individual creating this movement against a whole lot of naysayers, which is always what happens when you have a vision. And look at what he brought about, much more than he would have even been able to fathom. How massively successful he was after he died. The Olympics become ever bigger all the time. So he's super motivated, and again, is to save French civilization and manhood is really what he's after, and save sport for the amateur ethic. He's also consistent with the time in that he's a positivist. He is a positivist, and I've talked about that before. He uncynically believes in the perfectibility of people in society, and he's not alone in that. There's a lot of people in this era that have this positivist outlook, positivist worldview, that we are on the edge of perfection. This is the era of the grandiose dreamers on the cusp of a new century, and unifying mankind through sport is a great example of that kind of positivist confidence, that we can unify the world through sport. You see the same thing in Esperanto. This is when the Esperanto comes out, which I don't know if you've heard of, but that was this late 19th century effort to unite all the world by reversing the curse of Babel, by teaching everybody one universal language. That's a blend of the main languages of the world, Spanish, French, English, and Esperanto. There's still a few Esperanto speakers around today, but it was pretty much a complete fail. But this vision, this hope that we can unify the world, this idealism, and it's definitely an idealistic age prior to World War I, that late 19th century, early 20th century positivist time. In any case, after years and years of working to get support, it does all come together, and he plans a big meeting of a bunch of amateur athletic associations in Europe, and they meet at the Sorbonne in Paris in 1894. And this is the first IOC. This is the first International Olympic Committee. 12 countries meet here. The US is here, the UK is here, Australia, not Canada, and interestingly, not the Germans, which is partly the prejudice that Coubertin hangs on to is that he did not pursue the Germans originally, which goes against, of course, everything that he's about. But in any case, so the IOC meets for the first time in Paris, 1894, and they commit to hold the first games in 2 years' time, and then to hold them every 4 years after that, and starting in Greece. Now, right from the very get-go, there is an issue over where the first games would be held. The decision is made, and Coubertin fights for that, for the first president of the IOC, the chairman, to be the president of the Greek Amateur Athletic Association, and for symbolic reasons. And he fights. Coubertin wants the first one to be in Paris. This new chairman, he fights very hard to have it in Athens, and he wins him over. So from the very beginning, the IOC is divided over venue location, and then they divide over weather. Because the first one in Athens goes quite well, and now all these venues are built, it right away leads to the idea of having a permanent venue instead of rotating. Why have it rotating every 4 years? We can invite the world here and have one venue. And so that idea, which has never gone away, and in fact, with the cost of the Olympics spiraling, it's a conversation that will never go away. But it's there from the very beginning. In any case, the IOC also establishes this permanent governing body, and comes up with rules and a charter. Okay? IOC is stuck on the rotation idea, so there is power struggle, and that first Greek president steps down, and Coubertin takes the reins actually as president. Paris hosts the next one, which ends up being not a very good plan. Meantime, it's decided already at the Sorbonne that there would be 43 events, mostly modern ones. So while we still have discus, we got track, we got pancration, but mostly modern ones: cycling, shooting, fencing, tennis, golf, equestrian. These things are at the first Olympics as well. Also decided at Sorbonne, and this is because of Coubertin's influence mainly. He wins the day. He's quite sexist. It would be women, or sorry, it would be men only. Okay? So, and he's a hardliner on that one. He's still against women in the Olympics when he dies in 1937, and he's quoted as saying that women's events would be quote, uninteresting, unesthetic, and incorrect. Uninteresting, unesthetic, and incorrect. But he is overruled. I mean, he wins in gaining the presidency and moving it to Paris, but he's overruled in this one. And IOC decides that women may compete at the second Olympiad, but not a lot of them are there. As you can see there on the bottom side, we've got over 1,200 athletes and 19 females only, and they're limited to tennis and golf, so limited in events, and slowly that will crack open, but it takes a long time. IOC is now established as a permanent governing body, and Coubertin's the president, and yes, he's taken over, and he gets the second games moved to Paris, which is his signal victory, is the rotating venue thing. But here's the thing, and which suggests that he was probably wrong in gunning for that, because the next two Olympics do not do well. In fact, they're almost a big fail, and sports historians say they came very close to being discontinued because of that. They become the problem is at Paris that they coincide with, and that's by design, the Paris Exposition. So they coincide with the Paris Exposition of 1900. But that means that they are literally a sideshow to the bigger deal, which is this exposition. It also means that the games are stretched out over months, and there's coincident with the World Fair. Same thing will happen again 4 years later, but even worse, the following games are awarded to Chicago initially. And then, mysteriously, St. Louis, Missouri, because it's having a World Fair, puts in a bid or does some lobbying, some heavy lobbying, because Chicago's already been awarded by the IOC, and that they're having the World Fair, and it should be there. And the IOC decides, which is not the best decision they made. Although that wouldn't be the last. But in any case, they drop Chicago and they move it to Missouri. And it's a political gong show. There's a lot of wreckage already on the political side, which is the one point you should be getting here. But also, it's two straight disasters that almost killed the games. Meanwhile, and again, it's stretched out over months, and very few attend. And most of the athletes in the States are American, so at that game it becomes very imbalanced that way as well. Not a lot of involvement from other athletes, even though a lot of nations are there. Okay, two straight disasters. Greeks are still making noise and still demanding to be the permanent home of the games, so the decision is made at this point to revisit the model, and the IOC is still split on that, but they decide on a compromise that there will be these rotating games, exactly the way that in recent times the Winter Olympics are offset from the Summer Olympics. So there's going to be rotating games, and there will be an interim game in Greece always. So the interim games will always be in Greece on a 2-year offset from the other games. Okay, and the first one is going to be in 1906, and there's a lot of opposition to this idea, but it turned out to be a really good one, and it pacified the Greeks, and was not tainted by the political problems that we saw in Paris and St. Louis. And not only that, it's a 10-day window, so it kind of sets the it really sets the style for what the Olympics will be going forward, and it saves the Olympics from obliteration really by ineptitude on the IOC's part. So 10 days in start to finish. It has an opening ceremony where the nations march in into the stadium with under their own flags, which is successful. King George I opens it up. We get a closing ceremony 10 days later, and it goes off very, very well. Interesting point about those games is this guy, 100-pound Walt, 99 pounds, 5'5" Hamiltonian named Will Sherring wins the marathon. A Canadian, Irish by birth, as you can see from his shirt there. He wins the marathon. And here's the thing about the intercalated games and classic Canadian timing. And our success in the marathons in general, what we had with Tom Longboat in 1908, also disaster. But in any case, he isn't recognized in hindsight by the IOC because shortly after that, the intercalated games do not repeat again. They don't repeat in 1910 because Greece is in war, is in the Balkans War of that year. And then in 1914 and 1918, we've got World War I, so the games don't happen at all. So anyway, the intercalated games go away, and we're then after that are not considered authentic Olympic games, and so poor William Sherring does not get to get recognized as an Olympian, but he certainly is at home. He's a hero, and the city of Toronto gives him $5,000, which is a whole lot of money. Coubertin, very upset with that. He writes a letter to the Governor General of Canada saying that this goes against the sportsman conduct, pay for play kind of thing. But it looks like he got to keep that. But in any case, so here you go. A marathon gold, but non-gold. Canadians screwed by bad timing again. So yeah, but in any case, the 1906 is a turnaround success. Lots of countries. It's not a sideshow, and it's growing. And the marathon very popular. And actually, the William Sherring's marathon is the last of the with the ancient marathon length distance, because in 1908 in London you'll see the marathon being extended, so it goes past, so the king and queen can view it from their viewing box, as you know, that extra 300 plus yards. Okay, so there you go. That's how the Olympics ends up going from, well, great hope and expectation, and then going a bit off the rails, and then coming back. That said, 1906, the intercalated games very successful, but again, the Greeks vastly outnumber other athletes, so they've got over 200 there. The Americans have only 38. Canadians had 3, and yet we took that gold in marathon. Okay, so let's go into that first Olympic charter, which gets modified slightly over the years, but fundamentally has stayed the same. And here's the first charter in 1908, published in French. Later on, I think it's not until after World War II, actually, that gets translated in other languages, English included. But the very first charter, we'll look at the main principles of Olympism then, and how they, whether they succeeded or failed, and where they're at today. Okay, yeah, not till 1948 that we get the first translation of them. But the first goal, the first principle really is promoting a peaceful society with the preservation of human dignity. That's the first with any meat to it. You can see here that it comes off as number 2, but that's because the first one is a preamble that talks about laying out universal fundamental ethical principles, and here's the first one. So promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity. So human dignity is integral to promoting peace between nations. And here's Coubertin on that, very clear on that. Wars break out because nations misunderstand each other. We shall not have peace until the prejudices which separate different races have been outlived. What better means than to come together periodically for the amicable trials of muscular strength and agility? I remain convinced that sport is one of the most forceful elements of speech. I'm confident in its future action. Okay, so do they foster, or do the games foster peace between nations or within countries, and can they have been expected to do that? Are they a force for peace and for human dignity? That's something that is always debated, and historians actively debate that quite a bit. And it enters into the popular debate every time the Olympics come around, of course. And you remember Korea, so let's start there. And that game, those games again, we saw the same things. This hope that the Olympic Games would be a force for peace, and the best sign of that was that the North Korean team was playing with the South Korean team, which is amazing. If you think about it, what else can get North Koreans to do anything cooperative with the South? Right? And if you pay any attention to that issue at all, which is pretty hard not to, you know that. So that is pretty amazing. And in fact, it wasn't the first time the North and South Koreans have played together in Sydney. Does that lead to lasting peace between North and South? That's another open question. It doesn't seem to. Counterexample is Sarajevo, 1984. Olympics come to Yugoslavia, and they certainly don't seem to leave a legacy of peace among the Croats, Serbs, and Bosnians, who a couple of years later are blowing each other to pieces in that very same city. And in fact, it becomes a battleground, including the Olympic Stadium and the Olympic grounds. And tragically, a great symbol of that was a young couple that were from different faiths, Muslim and Christian, and Bosnians, I don't even know what they were. Fact check this one, but I'm going off of memory here, and they were sniped. They were killed on a sports field where they met, and what was neutral ground between the warring factions. So great symbol for that the Olympics doesn't always leave a legacy of peace whatsoever. Same time, the Olympics have this disturbing tendency to give legitimacy to regimes that clearly have no interest whatsoever in peace. And there's no better example of that than the NSDAP, the Nazis in the 1930s. For them, it was a massive propaganda coup. The torch relay was invented by the Nazis, and if you watch the movie Olympia by Lena Riefenstahl, you can see the torch relay going from Athens to Berlin, ironically through all these countries that are threatened by the fascists at that point, which they will soon be invading. And what the Olympics do for Hitler is they allow, and for Germany and the Nazi Party, is they allow him to whitewash the anti-Jewish hysteria away from Germany, and very intentionally, and to invite the world to come out and see this success, this economic miracle. Germany, having kicked the Great Depression, the only nation that has. We are not thugs. Okay, we are not thugs. We're a success story. And the fact that Hitler could mount this, could get the IOC on board, gives him massive validation at home. However it played abroad, and internationally it played quite well, very well, it absolutely strengthened his hand at home and his racial philosophy. This plays too into and this is what I talked about earlier, this propaganda by Riefenstahl, Leni Riefenstahl, and she's an amazing woman who, documentarian, filmmaker, who had disturbing roles within the Nazi movement and lived a good long life right up until the 1980s or longer. There's a great documentary about it if you're interested. But in any case, disturbing how Olympic ideal of physicality could fit so well with fascism. But the difference being that what the Germans are doing is it's a worship of sport and the body, but it's only the ideal Nordic, Teutonic, European athlete that is worshipped here. And it needs saying that this is a complete distortion of the original vision. And it reflects the German culture of the day. For Coubertin, Arnold, all these reformers, there's a spiritual core to the athlete, and that code is muscular Christianity, and there's no race within that. For the fascists who are trying to take Europe back, a good way to understand Mussolini and Hitler is they're taking Europe back to pre-Christian era. It's a neo-paganism where a time when the ancient Italian empire was great, right? Rome was great and conquered most of the world, and that's what Mussolini sets out to redo. And when the emperor is worshipped as a literal god, and here you see here this one image on the right, that is Speer's redesign of Berlin, or Germania is what it will be called, and you've got a Volkshall on one end, and you've got the Chancellery on the other end, and it's exactly like the Palatine in Rome. It's modeled on the Palatine in Rome, where you worship the emperor at one end, and he lives in his palace at the other end, and very intentionally, Hitler is that is to understand Nazi culture. This is a key clue here into what he is trying to do, and he's doing the same thing with sport, right? Okay, Mussolini and Hitler are both trying to recreate. They're trying to get historical creds by banking big on antiquity. And Germany had no great antiquity. They were just Celtic barbarian hordes that are actually the threat to civilization at the time, the threat to ancient Rome, running around Europe in blue body paint. But it's all invention, and the Nazi Party itself is prima facie contradiction of pretty well of everything, right? The Nazi leadership do not look like what they extol as the physical as these great examples of Nietzschean examples of Teutonic athleticism, right? Not at all. In any case, then that's another irony about them, but they're also a contradiction of everything the modern Olympics stood for, and they're a great example for us for showing what the Olympics actually was about, because this is a distortion which is based more on the original games. This is a distortion that's based more on the original games, where it's all about winning, and for them it's about race, and it's an evolutionary struggle. All about winning is that evolutionary struggle that puts the Nordic Aryan on top, which is why it's so interesting that at these games, Jesse Owens, what makes these games so interesting, that is Jesse Owens wins 4 goals, and there's a great goal. Great documentary in 2016, Canadian, actually, called Race, with a double entendre there, and it's about Jesse Owens at the 1936 Olympics. Famously said that Hitler didn't shake hands with Jesse Owens afterwards because he invalidates their racial theory and embarrasses the Nazis on their home ground. Not really true. In fact, he didn't shake hands with any other athlete other than the Germans, and when Jesse Owens goes home to America, he faces racism as well, right? Because this is the Jim Crow era still in the United States. But the fascist answer to Jesse Owens, they have one, is that of course the black race is faster and stronger because they are closer to our ancestors. They're unevolved, so it's a sign of their inferiority, not their true power. So it's amazing how they can make their propaganda fit with anything. But like everything else, it's pseudoscience. It doesn't make sense. It's contradictory, right? As is anti-Semitism. Jews are Untermen because they're dirty ghetto dwellers. Jews are Untermen because they're greedy bankers. They can't be both, but they somehow are, right? Aryan race is physical perfection. Hitler, Goebbels, and Goering, obese, short, black hair, beady eyes. Anyways, none of it makes sense. Bigger point, the IOC gave Berlin a huge propaganda boost, and the games helped the Nazis whitewash their image in a time when film and media was very new, and you could control the message. So the Olympics were very good, very important force for validating the Nazi Party and what's going on in Germany at a critical juncture, which is very damaging. Now this doesn't last, and here's the thing. The ability to manage that message in 1936 was something we haven't really had. It's eroded since then. It doesn't last, and in the digital age, it's completely blown out of the water. And in fact, trying to replicate that kind of thing of using the Olympics as state propaganda can really backfire badly. And the Chinese found that out, which you'll remember maybe when their global torch relay they started out with such great hopes. Global torch relay for the Beijing Olympics. Everywhere they stopped, it drew media attention of exactly the wrong kind, because at every stop there would be demonstrations by local activists against the Chinese human rights record, which is horrendous. And there we see how the games aren't easily manipulated for political gain. It's just as easy to get legitimacy as it is to have a global spotlight that shows all of the ugly in your country. And we saw that here in 2010 when the BC government had to do some work to explain the downtown east side. We even set up an information center in the downtown east side for because the world's coming out to watch. You better hide your laundry, or you better explain why it's dirty. And so we had a special center there for the media to control the message. This is what the government is doing for the homeless, yada yada yada. Right, and of course afterwards, and buying up a whole bunch of hotels just in time to just prior to the Olympics. That kind of energy can happen to solve a problem, to put a good face on something. But the Olympics, people are more media savvy today, and you can't control the message as easily. And yet the Olympics did validate China. The IOC gave it to them, in spite of the fact that they jailed a dissident in China for 2 years simply for opposing the game's bid. He's in jail for 2 years for opposing the game's bid, and the IOC refused to talk about it. So clearly that is not, when that happens, are you, quote, promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity? Right? No, right? And in fact, the IOC gets on side with regimes that when they offer them when they win their bid, and you saw that when they threatened to sue. The IOC threatened to sue Tibetan protesters to get their protest videos off of YouTube in order to have a smooth event in Beijing. So when Tibetan protesters are putting protest videos on YouTube around the Olympics, the IOC is getting on side with the Chinese state and threatening to sue them. Now politics works the other way as well. The Olympics has been, oh, by the way, before we go there, I forgot about this slide. Read this book. I read it a couple of years ago, and it was just fantastic. 1936 Olympics, the story that doesn't get remembered with Jesse Owens and what's about to happen with the world and Hitler and all those overtones is this crazy story of some working class, mostly working class loggers and lumber guys and small town guys from Port Angeles and on down through Washington State, who end up the Seattle group, the University of Washington group, ends up being the team that takes gold at oh, now I told you what happened at the 1936 Olympics. Anyway, Daniel James Brown, good book, a bit repetitive in describing the races, but I think you will enjoy it. Okay, I got a copy if you want to borrow. Okay, going on. Politics works the other way as well, and Olympics have been hijacked in ways that are beyond the control of the IOC, in ways that have almost destroyed the games for the second time. And that happened in Munich. And that's an example. In Munich, Israeli athletes were taken hostage in 1972, and that's because the Arab Palestinians are upset with Israel. So here's a global venue with a global audience, and here's your chance, right, to get attention. So they take these Israeli athletes hostage. If you've seen the movie Munich, you know what happens. They demand the release of a few hundred prisoners in Israel. When the Germans attempt to rescue, all 11 athletes and coaches are tragically murdered. The German police force their way into this hotel. 2 of the terrorists are killed and 3 are taken prisoner. But then Germany has to let them go because the Palestinians hijack a German plane and threaten to blow it up. And those 3 get a free pass by Muammar Gaddafi to take refuge in his country of Libya. So he has no problem taking them in. Now, a great film on that, as I said, Munich, which is the follow-up by Israeli intelligence Mossad. It's called Operation Wrath of God, where Mossad agents tracking down the hijackers that the Germans had released. But this is bad, but it tragic, right? Plays out on television, but it wasn't on the IOC, obviously. Here the games are simply providing an opportunity to get massive attention in a dramatic way by some terrorists. Munich almost ends the Olympics permanently, and this is what makes the success in Montreal so important. Montreal is super important for rescuing the Olympics, really, at a time when Munich almost killed it. Here's the thing, though, that is interesting about Munich is that the IOC doesn't even acknowledge it happened, and in a very controversial stance, that they continually kibosh efforts to memorialize these victims here, the Israeli athletes. Most recently, there was an effort at the 40th anniversary in the 2012 Olympic Games to have a memorial to them, and they kibosh that again. So that's their stance on that. Now, in the Cold War, this kind of thing also happens, where the games become a venue for the tensions between East and West. Okay? During the Cold War, they become a venue for the tensions between East and West, and we see that a few times. One is what's called Blood in the Water, and that's also the name of a great documentary in the 1956 Summer Games. And the games that year coincided with the Soviets invading Hungary. They're invading one of their satellite states in the Warsaw Pact because they're not behaving themselves and are pushing for reforms and have gone too far in that direction. They have to be taught a lesson, so the tanks go rolling in just like they will in Czechoslovakia in 1968. So it so happens that this coincides with the Olympic Games in Australia. And Hungary and the USSR happen to have a water polo match. The Hungarian team learns about the invasion when they're in Australia, half a world away in Melbourne, and they're and the Hungarians get in the water with the Russians, and they get them riled by throwing some choice Russian words their way. The Russians get nasty, and obviously this is overlaid with a whole lot of tension, right? I mean, it's amazing, and Hungary ends up winning 4-0. The refs have to stop the game, and yeah. Anyway, Hungary goes on to beat Yugoslavia, and they take gold. Good movie about that if you're interested, called Freedom's Fury. And not important, but Hungary's still a major force in water polo. They took a gold in Athens and in Beijing. More serious is 1980. In 1979, the Soviets invade Afghanistan to prop up their ally, and same kind of thing that the Americans were doing all the time. But we all thought at the time that this is the domino effect, and the USSR was Mordor, and they're taking over the whole world, and next it's going to be Pakistan, and then India, and whatnot, right? In any case, Summer Games in 1980 happened to be in Moscow. Because of the invasion of Afghanistan, the Americans boycott, as do most American allies, including us. 1984, of course, the Soviets tit for tat. They boycott the Los Angeles Games on some flimsy pretext that doesn't even matter. It was really just to get them back. So completely imbalanced victories for the Americans. Obviously, they dominate in 1984. So in any case, the Olympics were a surrogate venue for the Cold War, the struggle between communism and the West, which is interesting because sport reflects culture. It's just like how small nations were venues for this. The Cold War was hot in small countries like Nicaragua, Cuba, venues where superpowers play out their struggle. Maybe not Cuba being hot, but definitely there are hot spots, Vietnam, wherever, right, where this is being played out in active warfare. So yeah, like the games in Paris in 1900, turns out it is naive to think that politics can be kept out of it. And this is a stage where during the Cold War, both sides are looking for validation. But then it begs the question, is this a bad thing? What effect does this have? And it gets back to what we talked about before, vis-a-vis sublimation. Maybe this helped. Maybe it obviates actual conflict. The games certainly didn't make the world more unstable, right? They're a whole lot better than the arms race, which is the other game that the two sides are playing at the time, the nuclear arms race. So safer arena for political conflict, maybe a contained space for political conflict, which we've talked about, and you know quite well now, right? This idea. Okay. The Olympics have also been a venue for racial protest, and perhaps you know this, that 1968 Mexico City, John Carlos and Tommy Smith famously do the Black Power salute. This is the civil rights era. Vietnam War is happening. Martin Luther King has just been assassinated a few months before this, and in these Tommy and John are winners of the first and third in the 200-meter race in Mexico City. Peter Norman, who at the time, I remember thinking that he had not been involved in it, but in fact he had supported them, and he wore the badge of the OPHR. And the OPHR, there's the context behind this, is this group that's been pushing for racial justice among athletes of color, and they had certain demands that South Africa get barred from the Olympics because of apartheid, that Muhammad Ali, who had his boxing title revoked, that it get restored. They wanted more black coaches because they're almost all white on the American team, for sure. Yeah, and they want the IOC president fired. He happens to be an American at that time. Instead, he fires them and kicks them out of the Olympic Village and bars them from further play in Mexico City. They get to keep their medals. Norman pays as well by essentially being blacklisted when he's back in Australia. And the Australians, of course, say, no, that's not accurate, but pretty much it is. And there's been movies about this as well. And it's kind of fascinating because this is out of step with time, right? Black nationalism is seen as unacceptable, not a respectable way to pursue civil rights, Malcolm X, black nationalism, and all the rest. But the stop singing and start swinging side of the civil rights movement. And what's interesting to me is how much that's been normalized in sports since then. If you think of Colin Kaepernick, but that's pretty recent too, right? So Colin Kaepernick taking the knee during the anthem. But if you watch, if you watch any sports, watch the NBA this year. Black Lives Matter has become central to sport. This kind of protest is pretty much normalized now, but certainly wasn't then, was not appreciated, and has them barred. The IOC tries very hard to keep politics away, and the tragedy is that so do those nations to which the Olympics is awarded, because it is for them that important to legitimize their regime and their own stability, and the economic consequences of not doing that and having a failed Olympics are so enormous. The stakes are so high, and perhaps the saddest thing in Olympic history is the fact that just before the games came to Mexico City, students were protesting there, emboldened by the spotlight being on Mexico City. We're protesting in the thousands as part of the student movement worldwide. This is the year of Students for Democratic Society in the United States and Canada, and the student movement pushing for change. And they're marching, protesting the expenditure on the Olympics, which happens every games, and that it should go into social housing and should go into social causes, and they're protesting all forms of injustice. And the Mexican army opens fire on them, and claimed at the time that they killed 4 students, like Kent State University. In fact, the actual number, and it took decades for this to for the government to release the papers on this, but between 300 and 400 students were machine gunned to death by snipers. They were cut down by snipers on buildings. 300 to 400 right before the games begins, as 10,000 of the high school and college students are protesting downtown Mexico City. You can look that up. It's called Three Culture Squares where this happens. So yeah, politics does have a way of getting in there, and the Olympics are a venue, a surrogate venue for a whole lot of tensions. And but like I say, do they make the world more unstable? That is a real, it's a tough one to say with any kind of certainty.